Hello again, Steve here with a little bit of a conversation about how it can be more productive in our lives and therefore by sort of a tangent to that create a better quality in our lives. Now, this story begins with a bit of a story actually, or this conversation. I just recently, in fact yesterday, got back from a trip which nobody, as far as I know, really likes to take, which is to attend a funeral for a loved one, a family member of mine for that matter. And in the process, got to visit my mother quite a bit because my mother is in a extended care home. And in one of the conversations I was having with my mother, this elderly gentleman came up to me and he started talking. Now, a lot of the people in a facility like that, they have some form of dementia or some sort of related condition due to their old age, largely probably, right? But he was a businessman by the sounds of it most of his life, and when he was talking, it reminded me of that book by the nurse Bronnie Ware, who wrote a book called The Five Regrets of the Dying, or somewhere along that line, wherein she mentions how very often men who were driven by their work through their lives, they have these regrets that they open to near the end of their lives, these regrets that they had wished they had obviously had done, which is kind of the definition of regret, right? And this guy was recounting what seemed to me like a regret, which was he wished that he had spent more time helping others to fulfill their dreams. And he actually has this idea that he can somehow still fulfill this in his dying days. And it seemed to be along the lines of, he was talking about what we can contribute to the world in a productive way, because he had been a producer all of his life. He'd been a guy who ran a small business and he was producing through that. And it made me think about how, I had done a video before about how the world is largely made up by the extremes anyways, and everybody else in between, of makers and takers, or producers and consumers. And there's this relationship between them, right? Some of that relationship is beneficial in the form of producer and consumer, and other times it's dysfunctional in the form of what I would call makers and takers, which is generally established through a coercive system called the state, right, where the guns of the state, the force of the guns of the state take from some and they give to the others through sanctioned unions, through corporate welfare, through all kinds of legislation, welfare and what have you, forced indoctrination of children and whatnot. It's nevertheless a relationship, whether desired or not, of makers and takers. And like all systems that we, or all steps that we take to mitigate future calamities or whatever, such as fire insurance, where we don't wish for the fire, but we buy it anyway, such as flood insurance or other forms of disability insurance, whatever it is, that we don't hope for, but we can partake in them because of the potential, right? So what I'm saying is not a sure thing, but it is a potential, which is some sort of a societal calamity, which is probably most likely to occur as a result of a financial crisis. Now, money is like the lifeblood through which society and its commerce operates, right? So it's gone so digital at this point, whereas in the past it would be somebody handing a gold coin to another person, or even paper bills or whatever. And now everything's digital, and everything relies on this interweb of connecting, which to me it seems rather fickle. Anyways, it could have its hiccups. Not only that, the unbelievable amount of manipulation that goes on in the form of money printing, borrowing based on fraud, and of course large coercive forms of taxation. All of that going on at the same time, there is this greater and greater and greater extension into this digital realm. It all adds up to the point of, we can see now where national debts are basically going vertical, right? At one time they were creeping up, but now they've gone to pretty much vertical. And unless there's some sort of new math that I'm not aware of, there's a point of reckoning that has to be arrived at somehow, and it's got to implode. There has to be a bubble that will collapse. And when that happens, if people are not prepared with some sort of insurance, there could be real trouble. For example, if all of a sudden the money system collapses, the commerce in and out of grocery stores could stop, be interrupted. And with lean forms of productivity now, and through stores and so on, not warehousing supplies where they have like maybe a 2-day supply in the store at any one time, and when there's a rush on that supply, maybe only 1 day, it could be really messy, especially in the cities. So the idea is to, have a little bit of store, have a little bit of water on hand, have a little bit of food on hand. If you buy your rice, rather than buy the little bag, buy the 25-pound bag. There's things we can do to be able to extend ourselves out of ways until things calm down, right? That's a form of insurance. But another form of insurance, and probably the most valuable form of insurance, which I've been talking about for a long, long time, is to become skilled in producing something. Because that is the ultimate source of value in the world. If we really think about it, what is it we place value on? If we look back at it in terms of commodities, that is, like everyday commodities. If we look at it, it's the human input, the labor input that we put in, right? I mean, we can take just raw ore out of the ground, right? It has no real value intrinsic to itself unless we discover a value in it, in which case the discovery process is human input. Or we refine it, which is an input that we have to instigate, and to draw out that gold or that steel or that iron or that lead or whatever it is that we're drawing out. Same with the production of food. It's input of resources that we're the ones who instigate. And even if we say, some people will say, well, that there can be no property claim in terms of value for the land because it was there already. Well, that's not true, because we have what we call improvements. And if we take a piece of dirt way up in the middle of the north in the Canadian Shield or whatever, it has no real value except for the moose who eat grass off of it in the swamp. Nobody will pay much for it at all, unless just to make the claim that, oh, I've got this piece of swamp in the middle of nowhere. No, it's when there are improvement structures around it. And in the old days, we used to call that deed, right? So the deed on the land was what was done to it. A deed is a form of the verb to do, basically. It's like a noun of the verb, noun version of the verb to do, which is the after the fact. What did you do? That's your deed, right? It was a public acknowledgement of the deed done. And that might have been blazing some trees, it might have been putting up a fence, it might have been putting up a garden, it might have been putting up a cabin on the land. That was the deed. That was evidence of the deed, and the land that supported that deed, that was required for the deed to take place, became recognized as property, but it wasn't the land itself. So it's all about our ability. And when a calamity happens, if we are skilled in providing value to other people, then very rapidly there will be exchange of something, that will be barter that will go on right away. But if we have no skills and we're stuck in some government office in the basement of some high-rise in a downtown whatever, and all we're doing is pushing papers for some statute lawyers, we might want to think about what the heck we have to offer to the general public. So even if you're there, you might consider, what can I offer? Who do I have connections with? So that's important, the skills to offer. There's also the public recognition of value that we have. So I think people who have skills, but not only skills, but they have skills that they actually share to those who need those skills many times over. What this means is that, for example, if you are an individual who has a job, if you think of it that way, you only have one customer, right? You have your employer, who's essentially a customer in the market. If you just get rid of the idea of employers and employees and all this new pseudo speak, and just look at it as a market of providing value for a demand. You have some labor that the employer needs. So you exchange that for compensation in terms of monetary value. But if you only have that one customer, you're very vulnerable, right? Because if you lose that customer, like getting fired, or there's a calamity and there's no need for that pseudo value anymore, it's gone. And what I mean by pseudo value is, when there's a calamity, a financial calamity, there's still going to be value for food, there's still going to be value for fixing people's roofs, there's still going to be value for sewing people's clothing, there's still going to be value for all of the basic things that have existed since the dawn of humanity. But there may not be a demand for, I don't know, car collision injury law professions, or whatever. There's this whole gaming industry that is built up on just milking the system. And there's millions of people who are employed at it, very often by bureaucracies or contractors to the bureaucracies. And those, my friends, my suspicion is, they could disappear extremely quickly. And if you don't have any skills to present in the market, or you haven't saved up some other value in, say, gold or silver or even Bitcoin if it survives, then there could be trouble. There will be trouble anyways, but those who have more skills to offer, and those who have not only the skills, but recognized skills, they're recognized by people. In other words, you've diversified your customer base. You can do this on the side. You can create something in the evening where you create value and you deliver to people, and you do stuff on the weekend. You have yard sales or whatever it is, and people get to know you as somebody who creates value. Then in a calamity, not only do you have that value, but you have people who respect your value. And another very important thing, if you will, to have when something like this happens is other people who respect what you do. Because there's nothing more important to dig ourselves out of a challenge than to have the willing participation of others and the potential to build a team to get ourselves out of that, right? So anyways, I just wanted to share this. It sounds maybe a little bit scary. It sounds a little bit crazy, but it's no different in my view than buying fire insurance. It's not that I want to use fire insurance, but heck, if I've got it, I can sleep a bit easier that if my house does burn down, I've actually made plans for that. And I want to thank the old guy, I don't even know his name right now, who got me thinking about this, because here he was inside this home where he had only time to think, but it was a little incoherent, but still he had this point, which is that there's value to be created, and each and every one of us has that. So why not we all work on our value and get it out there and learn those skills that we can be able to, and also be able to meet many people in the marketplace, provide those skills. And I'm just saying, I'm extending that out to say, you know what, there could very well be a financial calamity coming, and if we have marketable skills, which we're already marketing to a marketplace, it's going to be much easier for us to transition than if we just stick in our little bureaucratic box somewhere, and which inevitably leads to this selfish expectation that we are somehow owed a job, when in reality, when that sort of thing happens, nobody cares about what we think we have the right to. I don't think, anyways. Steve, you're doing great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.